Today, we welcome you to our Fall Forum 2024. And let's just change it from forum to workshop. Why? Because sometimes it's fun just to change the names. But thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in. It's really good to see you. We're going to concentrate a bit less on some of the things you've seen 1,000 times, some of the fundamentals. This one's going to be more, and the title that you'll see as well is about giving and receiving. So we're going to start talking a bit more about topics that are important to you. Here's today's agenda. We're going to have a Gentian update, questions we're hearing from you, and that will be the sole major content of this program. And then a bit about how to give and how to receive. There's an awful lot more than you'd expect when giving and also when receiving. We're going to introduce you to a couple of those topics right now as we go along. But as you know for myself, I generally am the person who loves to begin and start by going big. So as I go big, I want to ask the question here. Who would like to first share? Ken? Okay, that's good.
Hey, thank you, Chris. It's good to be here with all of you. And when you decide to watch this, we appreciate your time for doing so. So my go big is it's that time of year. Fall is approaching. Actually, it feels like summer still, but fall is approaching here. Watching the leaves change, watching the cycle go through again after another year, it just feels like the years go by quicker and quicker and quicker, and the leaves are already changing. It's amazing. So good time for reflection, like Chris likes to say. Good time for the fall traditions to start. I'm a big tradition guy. We do a lot of traditions in our family, and this is when a lot of the traditions tend to start for us. So I'm grateful for the traditions in the family and all of yours that you share with us as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Mr. Mann, how about yourself?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I am just incredibly grateful for getting closer to my fiance, planning for our wedding, everything like that. It's just been an incredible experience, and I cannot wait to marry her next year. So yeah, pretty exciting stuff there. It's been really fun to plan something with her, not necessarily plan something for her, which has been all the random surprises, the engagements, all of that. So yeah, we're having a good time with that.
Yeah, awesome, phenomenal. Can't wait. How about Michael Bersbach? How about yourself?
Thank you, Chris. On this Monday, actually, I'm grateful for a weekend where I was able to connect with not only my family and friends, clients on Saturday as well. So kind of a rare weekend where you check all three boxes, but super fulfilling and super productive weekend as well. So just grateful that I was able to with
Outstanding. How about Zach?
Thank you, Chris. I know this is recorded, so that's probably why Mike said such nice things about his fiance. So feel free to snip that and get some brownie points later, Mike. But like Ken, extremely grateful for the change of seasons, not just the seasons summer to fall, but the change of seasons in life. So it's been so much fun lately as progressing through the years, and I'm no longer 24, even though Chris still says I'm 25 somehow, even though being with him for 7 years, I've only aged 1 year. But it's amazing to watch my friends and just everyone around me kind of going through different seasons of life, going from kind of post-college to their career, now starting families and all the different things that go with it. So just grateful for the change of life seasons, if you will.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. For myself as well, I appreciate this time of year because, as Ken said, it's a time of reflection. It's a time of sentimentality. It's a time for me to go back and look, and I call the trees giants. I've written several poems about the giants. And to my belief about the giants, spring, summer, and fall, it's wonderful to see the trees change. They're here. You can write great things about them, but they're always constantly with us. They are supporting us in both winter. So for me, this fall time frames, you go to a football games, you see the stadium lights, and it's so much fun to go there. Like on our Friday evenings, we go to watch the Homestead football games, and just the reminiscence of seeing all the kids having all sorts of fun with all sorts of issues you and I would no longer be concerned with, but to them, it's everything. It's amazing to see that if you kind of take that stroll down memory lane. So for myself, I went back to Iowa to a parents' weekend with my daughter. And she's at University of Iowa. Isabel, our oldest, is, if you don't know that. And we went to a University of Iowa game. And still, the biggest thing, probably the best thing in all of college football is turning around and waving for a full 4 minutes to the kids in the children's hospital behind it. I didn't expect it, but we were choked up by it. My wife and I both were. And how incredible both teams turn around and constantly wave for 4 minutes to the kids who are waving back at you in the children's hospital, going through everything they're going through. So couple things that really I reminisce with about football games, autumn, just some incredible people and 80,000 people turning for 4 minutes to recognize what little kids are going through battling cancer and other diseases. It's just outstanding and phenomenal. So I guess, Zach, I mean, actually, is we have a good friend who wrote the song, I Believe Most People Are Good. When you're there, I feel that way as well. When you watch the political season, you don't think that way as well. So at any rate, that's my go big. A little longer than normal, but I just wanted to bring that in as well. So with that, I wanted to go through and say the questions that we're hearing from you. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is less about all the things we've shown you over time. When the markets are good like now, people don't really have a whole lot of questions. They look at this as, an opportunity for them to maybe go out and do some fall leaf cleaning, some maybe traveling, some hiking, some different things as well. But I want to make sure there's one idea. We talked about it today a little bit in our team meeting, but it's called the bull market versus brilliance. We've had a bull market now raging for about probably 10 years, 9 years, if you will. From the bottom, it's about 13 years in 2009. But what I want to be careful of is it a bull market or is it brilliance? A lot of people are taking credit for it being brilliant right now. Oh my gosh, look at what we're doing. We're so amazing. Everything we pick goes up. It's called the bull market on purpose. Things go up pretty heavily in a bull market. And I think a lot of times we mistake this bull market for our own brilliance. I want to make sure we understand it, we understand what goes on and the decisions that occur for people when this is happening. This stock is going to go up way faster than that one. This one will go even faster. So we're looking around, we recognize them, we're looking for some of the signs that the market may be quite frothy. And we don't see a ton of them right now. We don't see a ton of people saying, I'm going to sell this one because it's going to go up so much faster than the other. But I want to bring you a little bit of that perspective right now because this bull market often breeds people believing that they're brilliant when it's just that the market is going up tremendously as well. So just a little perspective I wanted to add before I went into some of the questions we're hearing from you. But these are the questions we're hearing that are probably most important. Should I be worried about the election? How does the Fed rate cut impact me? Now, what should I do with my cash reserves? What year-end planning opportunities are there? What is the best way to give to charity? And I'm inheriting money. What do I need to know? So these are the topics we're going to talk about today. And in the very first one, I wanted to go through in the should I be worried about the election? You might have your own personal reasons to be worried about the election, but whenever I hear about elections in this season, if you will, it reminds me of back to when I studied Greek, the Greek etymology of these words. And the word poly in Greek means many, and ticks are blood-sucking insects. So you can take that for what it will be, but I think that's how I put it together. Sometimes I just don't pay attention to it because it seems all creepy and I don't care for it. There's a lot going on with personal opinions, but most importantly, I know you want to know what should we look at with the election. I think one of our great friends, if you want to go ahead a slide or so, Mike, we got a good friend. I like to say that because he's not really a friend. He's been around for a very long time. But Warren Buffett would say this, and I quote him exactly as you go through. And that is, Warren Buffett advises against mixing politics with investing, stating this. He's a funny man from Omaha there, right? But he's very sage, and he'll say this. He says, if you mix your politics with your investment decisions, you're making a big mistake. That's my best impression. I couldn't really do a whole lot better, but I wanted to at least give you that from the Oracle of Omaha as well. Because he does say it. I didn't believe it when I first heard it when I was 28 years ago in the business. Now I understand it. I've been through many of these political cycles, and I'd say be very careful making investments based on politics. Historically, the 12 months beyond the election results are fairly significantly good. So we can talk more about that another time. I don't want to go too much into markets, but I wanted to at least touch base on that. There's a very charged political environment right now, both directions, probably even going further away from center. We've had one of the candidates drop out and another one come in. It's really been an interesting time. So you may have your own personal politics, but I'd say when it comes to investments and economics, be very careful. You've read enough political history, flip that around, economic history, you'll realize that the United States is an economic engine first, loosely knit by politics. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to question number 2.
And I think one of the questions that we always get are, what are some of the things that we're doing behind the scenes for all of you, and trying to make sure that we keep the practice moving in the direction that we are being the most productive and offering the greatest service that we can to that who is most important, which is our clients. So one thing that we're constantly doing, and myself and also Ryan, who actually has a pretty cool accolade, we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but we're reviewing the portfolio holdings. And right now is actually a very interesting time to be going through some of this, because one of the ideas that we kind of have is that things are available to Raymond James and us at different time frames, and that's kind of dictated by the mutual fund companies, some different things like that. There could be something that we've been tracking for a long time that maybe just became available to us that we look at as being a recommendation and an opportunity. And so when something like that comes up, we take a look at what we're using currently, what changes has happened in the portfolio itself, and what's being actually managed within that strategy, and then seeing if the new one that we've been watching along the entire time is coming to fruition in the same way that we thought that it would. So Raymond James does an awesome job of continuing to bring us these with their selling agreements and some different opportunities with that. And then we also have those portfolio partners, those representatives who, in this case, have been talking to this gentleman for the last 3 years with no real opportunity. None of their other funds really lined up, but we've been watching this one that kind of came as an opportunity coming up here. So you might see some changes. And whenever we look to make a change in the portfolio, we will lead with an email to give you a heads up that we're doing that for you. So also looking at the conservativeness, the different opportunities there are, we sat down for an investment committee meeting and spent about 2 hours hashing out a whole bunch of ideas that we brought to the table to figure out which fits the strategy, which don't. And as we always do, we move slowly because we believe in the decisions that we've made over time and the strategy that has been timeless. It's an evergreen portfolio that's continued to work, and we expect it to continue to do so going forward. So, Michael, what do you have for us on the planning items that we're reviewing?
Yeah, another thing behind the scenes that we're always taking a look at is reviewing the planning items that we're bringing to the meetings and discussions that we're having with you, whether that comes down to rebalancing and trading your portfolio, taking care of the RMDs, looking at Roth conversion planning, as well as charitable giving, tax loss harvesting, making sure that we're optimizing our cash and cash alternatives. So these are ever changing, but always something that we're looking to review to bring the best service and advice to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those things that we're continuing to look at are those cash holding alternatives. Where is the best place to keep safe money for that, which is an expenditure that we see coming in the near future, or generating that consistent income as you pay yourself in retirement? So where can that actually be? And we've been able to find places that we can generate a little bit of extra return based on the current market scenario. So continuing to do that, continuing to look at how things changed. We talked about I-bonds a few years back as being one of these options that really operates well during times of high inflation. And then how does that change over time? Well, it gives us opportunities elsewhere when that seemingly doesn't seem to be the same type of investment that it was before when it comes to new money in that regard.
As a team, we're also always reading for perspective, whether that be to deepen our knowledge and education on the markets and financial planning, or as well as self-improvement. So some of our timeless principles come from some of the market experts that we'd like to read, which gives us great perspective. And then also on the self-improvement and always getting better is a model that we use here, focusing on reading books like that so we can become better people ourselves to help serve our clients better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And always with that reading, continuing to also evaluate ways to improve our deliverables. How can we bring the information to you in the best way that we possibly can? And what are some of the things that we're looking at? And that's anything from Peter and I had a call with Verizon about the phone system, seeing if there's a better opportunity there for us to be able to offer a little bit better, more inclusive service through the phone lines. And it's something that might not even appear at the top of the surface to any of you as you're calling in. Everything might seem the same, but it's just creating efficiencies behind the scenes that does allow us to do a little bit better on things going forward. And then also working hand in hand with Raymond James to make sure that we know what their new technology is, how we can implement that to just create a better client experience for everyone.
The team, we're constantly meeting with industry experts, whether that be portfolio managers, as Mike had mentioned earlier, evaluating our investments and holdings, as well as CPAs, estate planning attorneys, insurance and lending experts. With all of those markets and industries changing, we want to make sure that we're at the forefront of those changes as it applies to you and your financial situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last one is this always idea of continuing education. We're nerds. I mean, we live for this stuff. We really like getting into the weeds and learning a little bit more about what we can. And so we're continuing to go to different forums, go to different types of teaching sessions, and just continuing to learn. Zach will touch a little bit more on that. But on the centers of influence piece, I think, Ken, you got a little bit more you'd like to say there.
Yeah, the centers of influence, as we call them, you guys call them, estate planning attorneys, accountants, sometimes CPAs, sometimes enrolled agents. We've heard that too before. Real estate brokers, bank lenders, insurance experts, to name a few, as you see on your screen there. The insurance one is really interesting. We've heard some stories recently about roofs being replaced, partially being covered, partially not being covered. I've also heard some stories from some that, hey, we had this huge hailstorm that came through, and it affected maybe half of the roof or a quarter of the roof or something like that, right? Whereas as before, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, it was one fall swoop, right? Insurance adjusters came out, they took a look at it, and boom, next thing you know, the whole roof was replaced. Now they're getting more particular about what actually area of the roof is being affected, rather than just saying, yep, new roof. It's actually, this 1/8 or quarter piece over here needs to be taken care of. Or in other cases where we thought the roof was going to be covered under insurance, but only a part of it was covered under the insurance, and some of us had to come out of pocket for the other piece there. So it's good to do insurance reviews, especially now. We've seen a massive run up in real estate, whether it's your primary real estate, whether it's a second home or whatever the case may be. We're seeing a massive run up. Time to reevaluate the insurance, time to reevaluate when you look at your net worth as well. It has climbed. It is nice. Chris just mentioned we're in a bull market. All things rise. And when you take a look at that piece, making sure your umbrella policy, your liability coverage is up to where it needs to be. So we're constantly looking at experts in the industry. We're trying to vet them as well as we possibly can, asking the tough questions about how they run their practice, how they service clients, and really make sure that we have great resources for you, whether it's on the insurance part I just mentioned or on the tax planning side. When we get to retirement, we want to make sure we're maximizing your income. Maximizing income means that we're going to be pulling money from different buckets, most likely, and we're going to work with an accountant to find that sweet spot for you to get the most amount of income you can within the parameters, right? But also pay the least amount of taxes as well. So let's pay what we should, but no more. So these are the centers of influence that we're always vetting for you. If you have one that you really love and you've got to know it over the years, we'd love to meet them as well. We have a cadre of our partners as well, and we'd be happy to share those resources with you.
Just to touch a little bit more on the continuing education piece, as Michael mentioned, the mantra here at Gentian we try to stick to is AGB, always getting better. But we like to ask another question, which is, as evidenced by what? And really, we're very active, all of us on the team, going through these different programs. As Mike mentioned, Ryan on our team just took the CIMA certification, which is a Certified Investment Management Analyst. It's an extremely difficult test and allows us to better analyze and look at all the different deliverables and kind of decipher what all those partners and mutual fund experts that Mike mentioned as well. Ken just recently worked through a few things with Ed Slott, who is deeply considered as one of the foremost IRA tax planning experts in the US. So we got a lot of valuable information there. Peter and Lauren last week just attended a Raymond James regional conference, learning about all the different deliverables that Raymond James is working on behind the scenes and all the changes in technology and adaptations they're making there, so we can serve you better with our systems and processes behind the scenes. Lisa makes monthly calls with Raymond James Chairman's Group, the kind of the top advisor teams in the country that we're blessed to be part of. She works with them to work through different systems, kind of what problems running into behind the scenes with the back office and how to alleviate those. Last 2 weeks ago, I spent time in APFA, Academy for Preferred Financial Advisors, where over 2 days, we went up through about 20 hours of tax law changes and kind of going through if this then that scenarios with the sunsetting of the current Tax Cuts and Jobs Act starting January of 2026. And then kind of one of my favorite ones that's on here too is the Empowered Wealth and the True Wealth Mentorship. Each quarter, we go through one of our mentors, Ron, and that's really what is most important to you. And we do it for ourselves, but also through the lens of asking through the clients and also, in regards to your finances, what does it mean? What are we working towards? How can we bring more meaning and joy to our lives from here, whether we're towards retirement or through retirement and actively in it? What means most to you from here on out? So always trying to epitomize and go through AGB, always getting better.
Fantastic, Zach. Thank you. I had a question. It was kind of funny, but Mike, man, did you know why Humpty Dumpty loved autumn?
Can't say I do.
Because he had a great fall.
Probably should have known that.
You should have. I mean, I was just thinking you probably should know that one. I know. Kind of funny. But this one was, Ken and I were talking just today. He didn't know this, but the question is, you come to autumn and how do the leaves travel from town to town in the fall? How do they travel back and forth?
I don't know, Chris. How do they?
Automobiles, Ken.
Oh,
automobiles. Yeah. So couple good ones for the grandkids there or kids. Just want to throw those out there. Ken and I were having that conversation. He didn't know that. I figured he would, but well, we'll have to move forward in some of those. Just wanted to lighten the mood a bit with all the questions that we're hearing. But I talked a little bit about politics and the word about election and our wonderful, Warren Buffett. So the question that comes second is, how does the Fed rate cut impact me?
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I'll tell you exactly how it does impact you. To whatever extent. I mean, there's a few things to be seen and what that actually means for us. But generally speaking, when the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, it gives this opportunity for now borrowers to be able to get money at a little bit cheaper of a rate. So the idea would be mortgages might come down. The idea that you could borrow money to be able to buy a car at a little bit lower of a rate. Generally speaking, banks can now loan money to you at a little bit lower of a rate now that that's happened. On the investment side of the equation, what does this do to bonds? Now, this is the most interesting part because bonds are really, well, most interesting to me, but bonds are tied directly to interest rates in the regard that when a bond is issued by a company, they're trying to raise money for something. And so they're essentially allowing you to buy a portion of their debt and then pay you interest, much like you would pay a bank if you were taking out a loan from them. So with the rates coming down, now bonds are coming out to the market from companies at lower interest rates than what they were previously, making the previous issues of bonds go up in price because they're quite literally worth more because they're paying more interest to those who purchase them. So it does create some capital appreciation within accounts for those that own bonds as it continues to go lower. This is a lot of times though, like these price changes, it's very much like the market where it's supply and demand. As soon as buyers and sellers are noticing a trend in the market or a trend in the opportunity, knowing that the idea that this rate cut was very highly anticipated, we actually saw these prices change sort of ahead of time. The changes that happen after the fact are more going to be the changes with your ability to borrow money, the changes that we see leading up to it. And a lot of times, unless there's some sort of surprise, just being very consistent with those opportunities is the fact that interest rates on what the actual investing market is going to do, it's going to come down a little bit for your opportunity to buy bonds. So we'll see those current holdings go up in price a little bit. New opportunities kind of going down, but that's the idea of diversification. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how things are changing.
Awesome. So I guess like you hear this, it's kind of the battle of the Hatfields versus McCoys. Oh wait, it's the savers versus the borrowers, right? It comes back to those age-old things. It's great for one, may not be so great for the other. So thanks, Mike.
Hey, Chris, I really liked your Willie Nelson song reference there. That was good. I like that.
Actually I could do Kenny Rogers. You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
I like that too.
Next question I'll bring up now. What should I do with my cash reserves?
Oh, yes. Cash reserves. Always a fun one to talk about when you have cash on the sidelines. What do we do with it? Well, you could spend it. That would be one fun thing to do with it. Or you could save it for a rainy day or an emergency fund that we do talk about quite a bit with you. As your advisor, as we put in our financial planning cap, we do advise you to try to maximize your reserves while keeping your comfortability with what you have on hand at hand so that you could use in a day's notice, not necessarily 3 or 5 or a week's notice type of thing. So there's a little bit of difference in people's minds there on what they want to and what they want to optimize, I should say. So cash reserves, really interesting question. We got a call the other day. Someone wants to finance a new vehicle. They got a rate of 3.9%. So what was our advice? Our advice was to say, look, we can earn with our cash reserves and money market mutual funds right now over 5% currently. I do have a feeling that's going to be coming down a little bit and to be adjusted because of the rate cuts that Mike Mann just mentioned recently. So that's another way that these can affect us. But whether it's 4, 4.5, or 5, we're still earning a little bit more than what the finance cost is. So what can we do with the cash reserves? We can optimize it with money market mutual funds. We can optimize it with money markets at the bank. So the hierarchy that I've learned to try to explain to everyone is that it goes savings and checking at the bottom. Money market is a step up. Online savings like Capital One or American Express, to name a couple that are out there online. There's others. Then it comes money market mutual funds and CDs. That's kind of the hierarchy of how to optimize your cash reserves. And some of those come with liquidity, some of those don't. Some of those come with a time requirement, some of those don't. So again, based on what your goal is with your cash reserves, if you explain what your goals are to us, we can identify the right opportunity for you and how to optimize a good portion of your cash.
Awesome. There's a lot of things to do with cash reserves, as you're saying. Some of it's enjoy yourself. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. So the next one, how about this? What year-end planning opportunities are there?
Absolutely. We'll start with capital gain and loss harvesting. Part of that 20 hours over 2 days last week was going through what we can do now. There's going to be, as if you turned on the TV at all, there's a lot of speculation, not only about the election, but whoever gets in, this is going to happen. This is what's going to happen to the tax code. It's all talk right now. We heard from one of the top accountants in the US that no one really knows exactly what's going to occur, but we can operate off of what we know now, the tax rates we know today and for next year, and then plan for the sunsetting of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, like I mentioned earlier, January 1 of 2026. So one of those kind of arrows in our quiver, if you will, for planning to reduce taxes now is tax loss harvesting, that if something is temporarily selling at a loss, we can sell that, capture that loss, use it to offset some other gains. When we do that, we just have to be cautious about what's called the wash sale rules, that we have to wait 30 days to buy that back. If we're looking at kind of the opposite side, not necessarily planning for reducing taxes this year, but reducing taxes in the future, that's where capital gain harvesting can come into play and might be something that we really look at next year when we have a little bit better idea of what's actually going to happen with taxes moving forward. Because depending on your tax rate, we could actually sell something in a non-retirement account, that's at a gain, and actually pay 0 tax on it, depending on your tax bracket. If you're married filing jointly and taxable incomes right around 92,000 or a little bit less, we actually might pay 0% tax on that. With Roth conversions, we spent about 5 of those hours last week just specifically on Roth conversions, and we kind of come up with 7 reasons to convert. And again, the process of a Roth conversion is taking some money out of pre-tax retirement accounts and moving over to post-tax or after-tax, also known as Roth. So you pay taxes in today's dollars, and then those dollars go tax-free. We kind of created 7 reasons to do a conversion. If you have something to offset that conversion, whether it's net operating losses that you had from a business, if you're a business owner, if there are some other carry forward credits of some kind, that's an excellent time for a conversion. If you expect those assets that you convert to grow significantly is another reason. In 2020, small caps were down in that month of March when COVID happened, 40, 50% in some cases. Oftentimes we look to convert while things are down at that point. So when they grows back tax-free. You expect your current marginal tax bracket likely lower than at distribution. So if your tax bracket is lower now than in the future, it's a great time to convert. If you have cash from the outside of the conversion through your bank account to pay for the taxes, that's a good reason to do it. If you don't need those funds to pay for your normal living expenses, great reason for a conversion. And then the last two here, expect your spouse to outlive you and require those funds at distributions. One thing that we look at planning wise, even though it's not necessarily it's a tender topic, if you will. Oftentimes we go from a married filing jointly tax bracket to a single. Those tax brackets have at that point. And then the last one, which is going to be a talking point over the next year and a half here, is if you expect to owe estate tax in the future. Right now, the estate tax is at 14 million for one person. If you're married, it's 28 million, but with the Tax Cuts and Job Tax sunsetting January 1 of 2026, that could go down to 7, it could go down even lower. So a big talking point there. And just a few reasons to look out for, a few reasons with a conversion. Social Security tax, we look at and calculate out, or work with your accountant to calculate out. The net investment income adds an additional 3.8% of tax there. You have AMT, you have Medicare credits, Affordable Care Act credits we need to worry about, or other phase out of benefits. So those are all the things, kind of peeling back the curtain of all the things that we look at tax wise to potentially not do a conversion, or make sure we're really careful of and work with your accountant to make sure we're converting the right amount. And then kind of 2 reasons not to convert for someone is just leaving money to charity, perhaps. That would be better coming from a pre-tax account. And potentially if there's a potential for nursing home, if you use pre-tax money for that, you could potentially use it as a deduction as well, a healthcare deduction. Kind of the last one I'll just touch on is charitable giving. There's many ways to give. We'll go through in a few more details, but a couple of those are just giving in cash, like most of us do, but there's a few other strategic ways as well, giving appreciated securities, utilizing a donor advised fund, or if you're over 70 and a half, giving directly from your IRA to charity and paying no tax, which is known as a QCD. With that, Michael, why don't you go through the last two, family gifting and IRA contributions?
Zach, yeah. So for family gifting, the annual gifting limit for 2024 is 18,000 for single filers, double that 36,000 for married couples filing jointly. So up $1,000 from 2023, whether that gifting be an outright check or cash that you're giving, or contributing to Roth IRAs, custodial accounts, or 529s. And IRA contributions similarly got increased as well. Maximum for 2024 is $7,000 if you are age 50 or older. The catch-up limit is an additional $1,000, which would make the maximum $8,000. And to do that contribution for the tax year 2024, we actually don't have to have that contribution made before December 31st, but rather before the tax filing deadline, which will be April 15th of 2025.
Outstanding. Thank you, gentlemen. Now the question is, what is the best way to give to charity? There's an awful lot that goes on with this one. So we got a slide that will confuse you pretty heavily here. Let's throw it up. So here it is. All right, next slide. I'm just joking with you, messing with you a little bit here. Just wanted to show you here a couple of different ways to give to charity. First, everybody knows is writing a personal check. Cash, check, you put it in the deposit box, you put it in the, the kettle, whatever it is. It's a wonderful thing, and everything is really seen with great intention. There may be some other ways to do it, though. Direct gifts of personal property, life insurance, real estate, qualified charitable distributions, which are your qualified charitable distributions from your IRA that occur when you're 79 and a half exactly or older. You heard my terms, it's that date or older. So you can give direct gifts in many, many different ways, even if you don't have to take required distributions yet, which the laws have kind of changed. There's some philanthropic structures as well, donor advised funds, community foundations, supporting organizations. There's a bunch that go with that. There's some split interest vehicles where you get some interest while you're living, and on your passing, then the charity gets it. Those are called charitable remainder trust, charitable lead trusts, pooled income funds. So as we go, we're looking here at the private, well, the final one, which is private foundations. These tend to be a bit more onerous in their, I guess, overall administration, but there's a lot of people trying to break that down to something simpler. So a lot of times people would use donor advised funds as family foundations or family foundation-like investments. There's also something called a private operating foundation on the far right. So you can go from least complex to most complex. There's a lot of structured ways and why you would do something different ways. If you have questions, please feel free to let us know. There's also giving appreciated stock. There's a bunch of different ways to give. The biggest thing that we look at is this is just talked about the financial and the financial quadrant. One of the biggest ways to give is what we call heart, hope, energy, attention, resources like we have here, and time. So giving those you're going to find is some great way to give as well as like the HEART acronym. A lot of what you give that's most important isn't actually money, but these charities do need to operate and they do need money in many forms. So you guys have all been phenomenal at being philanthropic, but in case you guys had some questions on how to give, we wanted to give you just a chart that might give you some ideas or raise some interest for you on how you might want to give in a different way, even at the end of life. So with that, I will pass that one on to the donor advised fund versus annual gifting. Zach actually brought this back from, our APFA, Association for Financial Advisors he was at, learned this, and I thought it was quite interesting. Zach, why don't you enlighten us?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Don't want to go into too much detail on this, but we're starting to see the uses of a donor advised fund more and more, and especially with those sunsetting of tax laws, itemizing could become a bigger item, just with state and local tax and other itemizations starting to come back potentially starting January of 2026. A donor advised fund could be a great tool here for us. If you were to give $35,000 a year as kind of the top example, and the amount of deductions that you can actually take from those charitable contributions. And then on the bottom actually shows bunching those contributions into 1 year if you can afford to, and the difference in how much you can actually deduct during that time frame, and kind of from the top one to the bottom one, using a donor advised fund and itemizing all in year one allows for almost $58,000 of additional deductions than just spreading them out each and every year. So just thought it was a really impactful chart to just show one example. Obviously depends on your specific tax rate and your scenario and your goals and where you're trying to give it to, but it's an excellent tool in our Gentía toolbox.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Zach. That's fun. I mean, there's some incredible ways. I mean, look at that. When he brought that back in the chart and showed the bunching of, I thought, well, is that going to really make a big difference? I told him, and then actually he said, yeah, it makes a huge difference. So super enlightening. We appreciate that as well. With that, I'm inheriting money. What do I need to know? Well, the address for Gentian is 12740 North River Road. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm just messing with you. We will guide you. Here's our phone numbers. Here's a way to help you. What we often find, though, in receiving money, it's interesting, inheriting money especially, and I'm in Generation X. We're actually standing from the baby boomers to inherit the most money ever in history, which you inherited from the greatest generation as well. What's interesting about this is people treat inherited money differently than they treat earned money. What's that you say? You don't think so? Let me give you a little story here. I know a gentleman whose dad was a strict German, saved all his money, all his whole life, every penny, you know, every schnitzel, every nickel, everything, he saved it all, right? And upon this, my head client had always talked about, I really want to buy a Mustang. I want to buy this Mustang, but never would buy it, never would buy it. About a month or so after his dad had passed away and he'd inherited money, he shows up in a brand new shiny red Mustang. And I'm like, wow, it's a beautiful car. How, you know, where'd you do this? Well, you know, I figured I got this money and I thought it might be time to buy this. I go, what would your dad do if he knew you took the money that you inherited and bought this car? Oh, he'd flip over in his grave. So it's kind of interesting when you look at that. Somebody had obviously enough money to buy. They wouldn't do it with their own earned money, but they would do it with money they inherited. So what's the point of this? I have no idea. I just want to tell the story. It was kind of fun. No, the point is that people take this inherited money and they look at it differently. So when we look at it, you know, Ken, myself, you know, Mike, Michael, Zach, we've all seen all these mistakes made when people are inheriting money. So why don't we just address a few of those, you know, like cost basis? What are some of the things that we want to see? What should we give? What advice should we give you guys to people who are inheriting money? Because it's actually much more important than you'd expect.
Yes, Chris, I agree with that. And when you inherit money, there's some rules around that. And you mentioned a car recently, and it reminds me of a little bit of a joke that last night I dreamt I was a muffler. I woke up exhausted. So it's one of those things where it's a card joke. It goes hand in hand with what Chris was talking about. On a serious note, though, when you do inherit money, there are rules in a really good starting place to determine whether we have an IRA that we're working with or if we're working with other non-retirement assets. That's really the line that we have to take a look at right away. It's almost step one in the process. If there's IRAs involved, you can take a look at the complicated chart that you see in front of you right now, and you can see that if you're a designated beneficiary, if you're a spouse, if you're a non-spouse, if you're an entity, if you're a trust, the rules are so complicated now that it really takes a family tree chart to look at this and say, okay, if this happens, then that. And that's really what you're looking at here. So if you're in a position where you're inheriting money, talk to us. Again, if there's an IRA involved, it matters. There's 10-year rules associated with that. There's massive tax consequences associated with that. If you cash out a traditional inherited IRA, that is going to show up as taxable income for you, right? So we have to be aware whether that makes sense to do some of that, all of that, none of it. Try to use the 10-year rule. There's also the 10-year rule on Roth inherited IRAs, where the rule of thumb there is we let that go for the 10 years to get that tax-free growth for those 10 years. And then at the end of the 10th year, we have to take it out. That's the IRA side. The non-IRA side is taking a look at real estate, appreciated stocks that someone may have, mutual funds, ETFs, whatever the case is. There's something called a step up in basis. Cost basis matters upon someone's passing. There's usually a step up in basis, meaning that the price that somebody bought it for, say it was $25,000, now worth $100,000, it steps up to the fair market value at $100,000. So the beneficiaries get the gains, but they don't have to pay the taxes. That's called the step up in basis rule. That's been on the chopping block, by the way, for pretty much every election that I've ever heard of, and nothing's been done about it so far. So all these every year during election time, hey, what if Roth IRAs are going away? What if step up in cost basis is going away? These are all things to pay attention to, but these are the rules that we have at hand, and that's what we'll plan with as we know things. So if you're a trustee of an estate, you know how difficult that can be. There's a lot of decisions you need to make. There's a lot of disbursements you need to make. There's a lot of tracking down of documents that you need to make. And I just talked to a family recently where there wasn't a lot of communication that was had by the person who passed away down the lineage, if you will. So it becomes kind of a nightmare for the people that are inheriting the money or the things or whatever is in the estate. Once the communication is a little bit more open and free going, then people at least know where to go to find the documents, or at least know what you had. So sometimes we're finding communication is a very key part of having an estate flow nicely, if you will. When there's communication, it tends to be pretty good. When there's not, then the scurrying around of finding things becomes the challenge. It becomes the hard part, and becomes a little bit more of an expensive process, because sometimes the attorney has to get involved, which is fine if help is needed, but sometimes it's not necessary, if that makes sense. So inheriting money, Secure 2.0, all goes hand in hand. A lot of rules. We are here to help you, guide you, and help you make the best family decisions that you possibly can.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that as well. And Ken actually asked me this question earlier too. He said, hey, Chris, you know what the best thing to sink into, the best thing to put into a pumpkin pie is? I said, no, what is it, Ken? He said, your teeth. He was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So thanks, Ken. Thanks for that one. I appreciate that. So one thing I did say, so for many of you, you've heard of the IRS before. Have you heard of the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service? Anyway, they're the ones who are there to help us. So call them. They'll give you a different answer every time. But when you're talking to the IRS, it's interesting. They've actually come out with a new act. So they've got the Secure Act 1, Secure Act 2. We've actually got a new one. It's called the Insecure Act. It's basically where people do anything you want and nobody has any confidence that what they're doing is right. So that's coming out, I think, in 2025, sometime late 2025. They'll talk more about that. I'm joking. But as you go through, it's amazing to see what they do. Every time they change something, you're like, really? No way. In that act, you can now get $35,000 from your 529 plan if you had it for 13 years to your kids for IRA. I mean, it's amazing. There's a lot of things, so we'll keep you abreast of all those as well. With that today, I want to thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for introducing a lot of the great friends and family that you have. And even some cases, just people that are acquaintances. We really enjoy getting to know them, seeing them, hearing their stories, and deciding if it's a great idea for us to become working together and for them to become part of the Gentine community. But I just want to thank you. Most importantly, your job as the introductions are very important. Remember, our promise to you is we'll work on your situation. We're not going to spend time marketing you going through. We're going to work on you, on your situation, on what you've got going on. As long as you find people that you find that might be a good match, introduce them to us. Thank you so much. Our team is still growing as we want to be here to serve you and them and families for generations as well. With that, we appreciate your time for this fall workshop, for really you're spending your time listening and watching this as well. Here's our building. If you can look in the windows, Zach is in there, Ken's in there waving to you, waving goodbye, and thank you for the day as well. But if there's any questions, as Ken said, and as others have said, reach out to us. We've got a great team here. We're willing to help. We'd love to dig into some facts. If we don't know something right away, we'll tell you, but we'll find the answer. We are your resource. We're here for you. We've been put on this earth so that you can live a retirement like nobody else. With that, I want to thank you from here at our global headquarters. I'm going to call it Galactic Headquarters here in Mequon, Wisconsin on a beautiful 75-degree fall day. Thank you. You have a great rest of your week, whatever week that may be that you're watching this, and look forward to seeing you in person when we do. With that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.